Alright, welcome to the semi-finals of MDHO 2018. I'm Shari, your chair, and paneling along with me are Fakri and Behran. First of all, I want to congratulate all teams for making it this far. Now to introduce the teams, we have MBS Happy Team in opening government, MBS Tide Pods in opening opposition, 50 Shades of Water in closing government, and Sembrong AS in closing opposition. Okay then, without further ado on the motion about China's lifelong presidential term, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to start the debate. Here.
For many countries, the change in president brings a new start to their economic development, and it's most likely for them to become more developed in the long run. This is what our side will prove to you throughout our whole case. So moving on to what is actually happening in status quo, we think that the Chinese community are not actually aware what is actually wrong with their president. How so? We think that they have the internet firewall that blocks out all news from around the world so that the people do not actually know what is going on around the world. Secondly, this is a method to manipulate the society into thinking that everything is going right in their country, so there's no need for any change to happen in the occur. That's why the office, in the end, decided to choose to revert into a president of life law. So what are the tangible harms that can come out of this? Firstly, we think that the president can easily take control of the office. Why is this so harmful? Number one, we think that this allows the constant manipulation of power-minded presidents to take over the office. To take over and be more power-minded in the end. Secondly, we think that on our side, we at least limit the amount of power-minded presidencies. Even if we don't, we think that these power-minded presidencies will be much more pressurized when they know that they have a certain presidential term, so they can fulfill whatever they do to the maximum extent as their time is up. So we think that it's much more logical for us. That is a benefit that we also be able to provide. Another analysis is that they're actually able to get away with ineffective policies. Reason being, we think that the internet firewall blocks out so much opportunity for people to actually know what is actually going on, and for people to actually know how leaders can actually be bad in the very first place. The Chinese community is very clueless, and we don't want this to actually happen at the end of the day. No, sit down. Second tangible harm is that the stagnant development within office. The comparison between one president and according to presidential terms. In one president, we think that we might actually be able to, that their side might argue that they might actually have consistent policies. Why is this? That may not be effective or may not be beneficial. Even if it's beneficial, we think that it's much rather for us to have much more development. How so? We think that the current Chinese president, Xi Jinping, only focuses on military development rather than helping the people on the ground. We think that he focuses on military ships in the oceans and not actually focuses on the amount of poor people in the mountains and the poor people on the ground. We think that if you rather let him stay in charge the whole time, we think that the people on the ground will never get justice under any circumstance in their side. This is the biggest harm that they portray. In comparative to presidential terms, we think that why is this change so important? We think that these presidents will less likely become power-minded. Why so? Because they already have the mindset that they have certain time to prove their word. So they think that even if their presidential term ended, we think that it's much it's much more better for them to actually have a certain pressure so that they always have the good for society and not only for themselves. Before that, Vishnu.
I think the communistic society will be best represented when they have a president who can be with them for life. If that is what the communistic party or the communistic society believes in, why do you limit that idea?
We don't think that it's best for you to be continuously poor just because your president likes the military so much. We don't see how the people, we think that the people are much more manipulated under their side, so the people that actually do not know you under your side are making people more harm in the long run because people do not actually get the justice that they want. So what is our principle under our side? We think that we actually would much rather have people to be more aware so they can vote the president out, or even if they can't vote the president out, we think that the office members themselves can actually change the president and actually step up to the presidential office. So why would actually regretting this make things better? Firstly, how does our case uniquely works? We think that the mindset of individual or president is very hard to change. It's very clear because a certain president only has a certain mindset to fight for certain things, and even more so in China's case, when the president do not actually know, or the people do not actually know what is happening around the world, this means that the president will not actually shift his mind towards other things, and it's less likely for him to garner for more economic development to help the poor people, or to garner for more infrastructure and stuff like that. We think that it's much rather that the overpopulation in China will occur much under their side because the president only cares about the military and the ships and so on. No, we think on our side, we think that we promote more office development. How so? Because the office is exposed to much more new ideas if different presidencies take over. Because different presidents have different views on how they want to govern their country. But their side might argue that the internet firewall may stop people and the people are still not aware. How does this help under our side? We think that it's much better for our side to actually have a change in the office, because then the office bearers and the office members themselves can actually know what is actually the different perspectives on how more effective policy changes can occur under our side. We think that's the biggest benefit, that we actually portray under our side. Before 6, yes.
Yeah, we think you are going to lead to a country like North Korea where you have to rig the democracy in itself to maintain the power when you have these new kind of political ideologies existing.
I think that it's much more likely for your country to turn into a dictatorship. Why so? Because the presidents already know that the president for law supports them supports them until they die. This means that they know that no one else can take away their power. What happens then? This means that their power mind will slowly turn into controlling the people and to controlling what they actually want so that they can reap the benefits only for themselves and not for the people. The third reason why we actually take this debate is because people's development is actually much more prioritized under our side. We think that the people can actually have better lives with different change of presidents. How so? We think that it is much likely for a different president to come in and recognize the problem happening on the ground. So it's much more likely for him to want to cater to that problem and also know how to cater to the old benefits which the old president already maintains. We think that the worst case on opposition is that it never develops. This stagnant development is much more likely to happen under their side, and the office more likely to develop into dictatorship under their side because they know they can never lose power. We think that China is much better on the government side. Thank you.
Alright, I'd like to thank Prime Minister for his speech, and I would like to call upon the Leader of Opposition to respond. Here.
It's problematic for side-opening government to tell you that Xi Jinping was a bad president. Notice that Xi Jinping led to a large amount of influence that strengthened Asia and China. Not only that, he was able to crack down on corrupt officials that existed in China. Understanding that, it's likely for you to believe that Xi Jinping is a good president. But even if he's not, here's a few reasons why he should still stay in office. But before that, a few things that we need to characterize and we need to understand. They told you that individuals need justice. The problem is, they didn't show you what this justice was, or how individuals with this justice would look like, or how they would react with this justice. This means that the justice that they want to prove wasn't sufficient. But even more so, we think that individuals in China are already happy. Because notice that the reason why the abolishment of the president term limit was abolished by the Communist Party. This means that a large majority of the individuals living in China agree with Xi Jinping's choices and policies that he made. That's something that's more harmful that happens under their side. Moving on. So let's take it under their best case, right? Where the president is able to change and all these kind of things, right? Let's say under their side, a new president is elected. We think that it's still harmful for a large and very powerful communist country to develop or change towards a different government who is now and a country who is becoming more democratic. Why is this so? We think that the large amount of influence and the large amount of changes that Xi Jinping had on China is likely to be hardly reversed by the communists, by people on the ground. This means it's harder for people to get jobs under your side. It's harder for people to be happy without a government that they don't agree on. Let's say that even under the worst circumstances, that even the government is still likely, people like the government. This is when the Communist Party, though still in power, is still likely to rally against this government, is still likely for communist parties to influence people inside China. Why is this, how does this happen? Notice that the Communist Party in China is one of the strongest and one of the most notorious, one of the strongest inside China. Understanding that if they are the only one with the greatest influence, it's likely for them to influence large majorities of individuals who will fight back or rebel against the new government. A few things that I'm going to talk about inside my speech, right, on how the society it's harder for society to change, and how Xi Jinping in itself is already a good president, but even if he's not, why it's still better. We think that individuals who follow Xi Jinping, we think that leaders that want to overtake Xi Jinping inside this election will never get the chance either way. Understand that a lot of people in China follow Xi Jinping. This means new leaders inside China will never get the opportunity to rise above him, since a lot of people already trust him. Even if there are a lot of internet firewalls that you can't access, if individuals are happy on the ground, if individuals do get jobs and do get money, why is that so harmful? I think that's the better justice, and that's the only justice that can happen inside this school. Have a seat. We think that under these circumstances, individuals are likely to work harder because they like their government. Communist parties are likely to be less enraged because Xi Jinping is still in power. What does this mean? If Xi Jinping is still in power and communist parties don't have to react out or lash out to other individuals, it means that society is still likely to be happy with the government, all this kind of thing. Follow that. Sure.
We think that you're living in such an idealistic world where there's no problems in China. The problem of overpopulation and the problem of poor people on the ground are still existing, and Xi Jinping is not doing anything about it. Please explain to us.
Okay. Understand that China is indeed a big country, a country that has followed communism for years and years to come. If that whole society is forced to change towards a democratic country, it's much likely for individuals, but not only individuals, the large majority of the communism party to break out and lash out towards the individuals and lash out towards the government. Even if you have a good government under your side, it's still hard for individuals to adapt to a better society, not only because the government is trying to change it towards a democratic country, but secondly, since the Communist Party is such a big obstacle that is likely to never be overcome by the government that society doesn't even know, doesn't even support. Why is that harmful? We think that even if you have good presidents, better than Xi Jinping, who still provide better welfare and healthcare towards you, we still think that the Communist Party is still likely to lash out and break all these kinds of influences in the end. So what's the outcome under our side? Under our side, sure, maybe individuals on the ground are likely to be harmed for Xi Jinping, maybe prioritizes more on military. But what happens under their side is that you have a country that is hard for you to opt out of, meaning that your country is likely to go into a state of downfall because your society cannot co-op or cannot adapt to these situations. What does this mean? This means that there's a large misrepresentation of China of a good and powerful communist party. The reason why China is one of the greatest countries in the world is because that the Communist Party and the individuals on the ground support them so much. This is why China is one of the greatest and biggest threats to the US, right? So under those circumstances, if you lose all that support, the strength of China itself is dwindled down. This means it gives more opportunity for bigger countries to lash out at them or to fight them or to lash out at them, such as US and all these kinds of countries. Understanding that, we think it's better to have more people on the ground maybe heard rather than a whole country being deemed down upon. And even if you have that internet firewall broken down, individuals will always look at you downly because you are a country that cannot function. With that, I'm proud to oppose.
Alright, I'd like to thank the Leader of Opposition for his speech. I would now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to consolidate the government. Please hear me.
The point in which we can still see children walking a few miles to their school through mountains in order to get to their school every day is the point in which we realize that the welfare of the Chinese community on the ground isn't catered to begin with. The point in which they still think that this is okay and they still like their communist government is because of the control of the government and the manipulation of the government over the people to begin with through the internet firewall. We tell you that this is the main problem and the biggest problem with the Chinese community. They do not know that they should fight for their own welfare and they still think that the government is doing something which is good. We believe that this is when we want to make a change in order to have improvement for welfare on the society to begin with, Mr. Speaker. A couple of rebuttals coming out from the side government. Firstly, they wanted to talk about how Xi Jinping is a good president. We don't necessarily think so. We think he is good in a sense that he is able to focus in one area particularly, which is the military ground, in order to gain more influence. No thank you. And that is exactly why he is able to gain influence and take down corruption, because he is too focused in one area, which dilutes his focus and attention towards other more important aspects, for example, the welfare of the society to begin with, right? Number two, we believe that they also talked about how the reaction of the society will be back towards the new government. We don't think that just because it is very hard for us to change the perception of the society, then we should stay stagnant forever. Why so? One reason for you, because, no thank you, we must understand that more and more countries are improving to become a democratic country. The point in which your China stays in a stagnant development and do not have any improvement in exchange of perceptions in order to change their communist views or communism. This is the point in which it is very hard for them to interact with other countries, especially when they have an intense relationship with America, right? Moving on to my arguments for you today. 3 outcomes that will happen under side government. Number one, we believe that we improve the quality of policies making. Before that, sure.
Yeah, I think now you make your Communist Party more controlling or more dictator-like when it comes to politics. So when it comes to the diverting of your Communist Party, I think it happens more under your side.
So the point in which you allow presidents to get voted out, or you allow presidents to get changed in the office, is the point in which, like how my Prime Minister has already told you, that there is different perceptions that exist within this office itself, and this is the point in which we believe that all those control and manipulation over the people will not happen anyways, right? Even if it happens at a harder scale for the government to actually control their people. First outcome, we improve the quality of policies making household because we concede to the fact that we trade off the consistency of policies and the focus area of policy in order to have more diverse attention or diverse improvement in other areas. Household. Let's make a comparison between consistency and the change within office. So what will happen when people have consistency and one president only? This is the point in which they focus on one area, like what I've been repeatedly talking about for you today. What happens when you have change within the office? This is the point in which the people below the president rankings also change, and the whole office in general change as well. This is when we have different policies making for different areas. For example, the welfare of the society, the military. We concede that we might not have as much improvement in certain areas, but we are willing to trade that off simply because we believe that we should always have policies and improvement in all kinds of areas rather than only one areas, right? The point in which we have change within the society also allows different presidents to flesh out other issues which are more important and should be given attention and not given attention by the current president now, which is Xi Jinping, right? So moving on, we believe that the presidents might also know that they have a chance of being change, and that is why presidents who are power-minded, no thank you, will have the pressure to do better, since now there's the pressure within the society or pressure, international pressure, in order to force him in order to improve himself in policies making to cater to the people on the ground, right? This is a point in which we have at least some form of improvement within the welfare of the society. Moving on to the second outcome, which is basically the propagation of propagandas, right? So understanding that it is so easy for the current Chinese government to manipulate the minds of the Chinese people by telling them that it's okay for you to be poor because we are a large country and we cannot have as much funds to help you, but the point in which they use so much money in a military force is the point in which we believe that we must have a different president in order to have different perceptions and different policies making in order to improve the welfare. We might understand and we concede to the fact that the people like and love their government so much, we are willing to trade off the societal reaction towards the government, which is bad, because the point in which we would not want people to constantly get oppressed and constantly get ignored on the ground just because they think that their government is so great through the internet firewall to begin with. Third outcome, we are also able to provide more development for China, which means they are able to keep up steps with all the other countries around the world. How so? Because like how I've already explained to you, more and more countries are already improving to become to impose or to endorse democracy system. No, thank you. So we believe that the democracy system is very different from communism. The point in which just because it is very hard to change the development within the society, and just because it's hard and you don't want to change it, is the point in which your Chinese community will always stay stagnant and always believe that the government is good. It is very bad because China will slowly lose out after years developing in the long term, because once they realize that they must change in order to have same policy makings or same perceptions towards politics, it is already too late in the next few generations, because now they already constantly strengthen the perceptions of their people to begin with. What do we restructure under our side? We restructure the system in the politics in order to be a more diverse political system rather than a one focus area political system. We believe that China is only able to become so great and so powerful because they are focused and not diverse. We would rather them be not that powerful and not that great in order to be diverse and cater to their people on the ground, not leaving them aside and ignoring their welfare to begin with. With that, I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
Alright, thank the Prime Minister for his speech. I'd now like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Yes.
I think to cancel out OG, the only thing we need to do is clear up one question. Does democracy have any affiliation with communism? Because OG wanted to come up and tell you that, well, now we're going to have elections, China's going to become the open country, we are going to continue with all the other countries that are taking democratic stances. Understand that that China is one of the homes for communism. And let's understand how communism and how your presidents are being chosen. You have a certain president, and then he chooses a heir to the throne. The same way how Vladimir Putin was chosen to this position in power. Bearing that in mind, and how communism works, is that this group of people are going to control all of your companies, they're going to control all of your institutions, right? So that's essentially the basis of how communism works when it comes to the election of president. With that in mind, let's just tackle OG. First thing, their case doesn't stand. Because you want to introduce democratic elements into a country which is so communistic, I don't think it works. Later in my argument, I'll tell you why this communistic safe haven is the only way for China to go, because China number one, right? Let's move on to a few arguments. First, they wanted to tell like how we are going to have dictator-like rulings and all of the kind of narratives. So, you know what? Let's just go into my argument, right? About how China wants to maintain its power as this communistic safe haven. We have to understand that communism would like to not have any forms of narratives of democracy. So we think the difference between capitalistic and socialism is capitalistic, you have companies who come and then invest in your countries, or they have certain control over the people. Communism is whereby you have the whole government ruling all of your individuals. Bearing that in mind, let's look at what happens in the dictatorship under our side, right? Because they wanted to accuse you that if the presidents are going to be there for life, they're going to implement policies which is going to control your whole government, your country is going to fall down, there's so many problems with welfare like that. I think not. I think that the fact that you already have the support from the president, or you are supporting the president itself, and it's very difficult for minority movements or anyone to voice out against the Chinese government. The fact that you crack down upon all these individuals makes it hard for them to even voice out to begin with. So what does happen in our side, right? We forego the fact that certain, new movements are going to pop up in China, but rather the fact that everybody is going to go with the safe haven. So here's how the world's going to work if you're in government, right? Your president is going to be fearful that he's going to lose his position in power. You're going to become a country like North Korea where you rig the democracy, where you never allow any form of this election that they deem is democracy to exist in China. So what would that happen to China at the end of the day? Your country which still wants to represent communism but has elements of democracy which are both mixed up in itself. So how does this affect the stance of communism in China? I think it just makes the whole situation a lot worse. I'd rather stick in a world where everybody has to comply to the Chinese world, has to comply with the communistic narratives. Because here's how China works, right? When everybody has to support China, when China makes a policy making difference, you support it. If people go against it, you're killed or you're basically arrested or being assaulted. I think if you're going to go with government's world, all these people will still be held in captivity anyways by the Communist Party. And rather than now, they want to strengthen their stronghold when it comes to the idea of people challenging them. So now your government becomes more oriented on being politically strong. Our world is where you focus on military and you have the Belt and Road narratives on helping to strengthen the economy. We think that still exists under our side. You are going to live in a world where you only want to focus on politics. You never allow any narratives for this president who's being supported by the community forcefully to even progress anyways. I think we have to understand that this community is going to be forced to agree with all the narratives of this communistic party, and we think we provide the best form of salvation. Because you need to know that you will be killed in regards to any instance. The only form of rebellion that's going to happen in this world is ones which are passive-aggressive, whereby you could voice out or you could have graffitis and maybe meet up with certain groups in certain areas. Yeah, sure, we are willing to trade off those kind of narratives that are going to exist in this debate. Because mind you, China is never going to allow any gap between their work of communism. They will never allow anyone to intervene, and we are going to kill you off if this narrative exists. But yeah, sure.
How under your side then urge the president to improve the welfare of the society?
Yeah, so because you forcefully support the president, and if your president doesn't do anything for the country will fall. Notice that people, like any president in this mind, already has the support of the people and needs to make constant change. So when you have the support of people, it's easy for you to make policies that people follow. You force them to follow, but yeah, sure. We think the fact that you can influence so much people in Asia because your society is backing you, even though it's forcefully, they still get some form of economic stability. We think these are the kind of individuals who can then sustain their life to a certain extent. In government's world, you don't allow those narratives to pass. It rather becomes inconsistent in the communistic party within itself. So they never showed us how it is going to run. So then Gov also wanted to talk about this idea, we can influence policy making, you have officers who are more open to the world. Yeah, we think those people will also be clamped down on, and we don't know how they will even prosper in any way. So here's how we're going to talk about the self-sustainable China government, right? Because we already know that they may be placed with sanctions because they're trying to fight for land in South China Sea, or they basically don't stand with the economic idea of free trade, right? Because China is one which is self-dependent in itself. So here's how we think that you having your own president will maintain that sort of power. Mind you, in government's world, you basically you give some form of leeway if you want to go with democracy. You give some of leeway for certain companies to come within your country and absorb or leech all the kind of workers that you have in your country. So how does this affect your economic stance? One, you go against the fact that communism is where your government is supposed to control everything. Two, is you let some form of work labor force exit out of your country. Three, is that when this happens, your government starts to fall because your president can't control anything or regulate anything the way it is. Lastly, on the idea of how other communist states would look at China. Because you have countries like Russia and North Korea which are self-sustaining on China. Mind you that China is the only linkage when it comes to North Korea when they want to deal with them or have any economic development whatsoever. So how will this president affect it, right? So we think this president is the only individual who's going to maintain that side of connection with these individuals. You bring a new president, you complicate matters. What kind of complication are we talking? Changing your stances of certain policies, or maybe or society which is not sure of which policies they are supposed to support. Because mind you, even though we have a dictator, we think the society is already forced to agree with it, so you're more willing to comply with all of the situations that the government is placed in. Do you? In government side, even if you have some form of democracy, you still make people comply to all the narratives and you make people basically make people worthless when it comes to your value of judgment. I think you cannot in China allow people to have their say, but rather if there's one say, you follow it consistently.
Alright, I'd like to thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for his speech, and now to start the opening and the closing half of the debate, I'd like to call upon the Member of Government. Here.
Alright, so I'll only be giving one major point. When a president stays in power for as long as they want, it becomes an authoritarian or even dictatorship era. We believe that it is exactly this thing that will prove detrimental to the lives of the citizens themselves. When there is no limit to presidential terms, there would be no way to change the presidents through the voices of the citizens. It stops new ideas, new angles that can be brought up by simply switching up presidents. There will be a devolvement of political progress instead, especially when the only chance to even see these is to wait for the current president to die or possibly step down from the pedestals themselves, which is rather unlikely. When the president stays there for as long as he or she wants, people's voices and opinions will be silenced easily. And even our opening government already said, the firewall in China is so great that it will block out all negative criticism about the government. The only thing left will be only the positive imagery of the government themselves. How every policy, how every president is perfect. It creates an echo chamber that bounces around the same narratives to everyone in their society, and these narratives could be harmful. They believe that everyone is happy living under an unchangeable government. They are forced to support the government. It's not because of the political ideals that they support, it's for survival. When they say something negative, they get blocked off, threatened by the government to be locked up or even killed. That is how bad the situation under their paradigm will be. If they let a president stay in power for so long, they are giving power to one person who will be controlling the lives of many others for so many years, till the day that that president dies. By having the same president in power, it secures this echo chamber perfectly. This echo chamber of people being chained down by government because of the power that they have. the president won't change. No one can speak up at all for as long as the same person stays in the pedestal. It is a chance of changing narratives that drives people to speak up when they can see the changes occur in their society, in the government itself. They have an echo chamber in their side where only positive imagery of the government exists, influencing people's mindset, making people think that the president is so good. But the fact is, they aren't as glorious as they are described to be, because those are only false opinions. Those aren't the true voices of the people, and we don't believe that we should we should conform to it. Before I continue, yes?
Yeah, so I think the idea of communism, or even if you have these new parties, they still want to restrict the ideas that people are being spread to. Like how North Korea, we are forced to believe that Kim Jong-un is the only and ultimate leader.
Well, the thing is, if they let that happen, when they restrict the voices of people, when they only let one thing to happen, the problem is, if that narrative that they're pushing is false, are they going to let everyone to follow that single narrative, even though it is bad? Well, I'll continue first. We on the opposition side want to allow at least a form of democracy in China by letting people speak up about the government, and that can only be achieved on our side. They are making China into an extreme authoritarian country where life will be restricted, voices being silenced, protests being pushed down into nothingness. They are giving even more power for someone to completely shut off everyone else. The thing is, there are people out there making democratic protests or trying to push democratic ideals, but those are pushed down almost instantly. There are people out there who don't even want to buy into the communism completely. And so we believe that it could be better to give the people a chance to speak up instead of letting everyone stay in this echo chamber of positive imagery that could prove to be detrimental to everyone, because it is conforming people's mind to believe that their world is perfect when it is not. We don't want that kind of world. We don't want that kind of society. We want people to see the bad things in one's life. We want them to see the dark side of the government in which they cannot show at all. In their society, in the internet, where they block off literally everything that is bad about the government. We believe it is exactly this echo chamber that will kill off everyone in their society. And that is bad. Well, to wrap up my case, to quickly wrap up my case, the problem is okay, fine.
Yeah, prove to me how you're different from OG, because we practically took down OG and you still stay with the same stance.
My stance is that we don't want people to stay in the echo chamber. They have been rather focusing on problem is we're trying to focus on. We're not harping on democracy that opening government is opening opposition. Opening opposition is mostly just pushing the democratic ideals, but we're not. We just want a small part of. We just want people. We don't want an echo chamber. We just want to break down the echo chamber itself. The echo chamber where everyone is constricted, restricted. Well, I have to wrap up right now. Okay, so. We are closing opposition wanted to believe that we regret China's President for Life law because we want to abolish. We want to cancel out this echo chamber that shouldn't even be. They shouldn't even exist in. That shouldn't even exist in one society, because that is simply bad and that.
Alright, I'd like to thank the member of government for his speech, and I'd like to call upon the member of opposition. Here.
in order for both opening government and closing government case needs to function, they need to have people that don't live in the echo chamber. Their way is to break the internet blockade, but they never told the House on how by changing president, those kind of situation will still the same. Because recognize that the political system in China is by Communist Party choosing what president of China who will rule the country itself. And more likely or not, the Communist Party of China itself would choose president that would keep it that way, that would not make any types of internet blockade removal at the very first place itself. Those kinds of ideas that exist under side government at the very first place itself does not function and does not benefit towards the citizens of China and the political system of China at the very first place itself. In my speech, I will do a few things. Number one, I'll tell you on how a leader itself or how a political system of a country needs to represent their citizens. And we think that the citizens of China itself is a communist society, and how under our side we keep it that way. And number two, on how we give, let's say, we give the president chance to execute long-term development, economic development, and at the same time, what are the check and balance that exist within the status quo, and what are the alternatives that side closing opposition would bring. Moving to my first argumentation, which is why leaders should represent their citizens. Recognize or not, people in China are agreeing with communistic society. They live happily with it. Side government might tell you on how there are certain welfare problems that exist within the status quo. But do mind the fact that every country in this world almost have those kinds of problems, except a few countries that are very developed countries at the very first place. Even United States of America have those kinds of problems that are democratic at the very first place. Therefore, we tell you that there's no difference on their side why they want China to become a democratic country at the very first place. Later, I will explain to you on how we could also improve the welfare of Chinese citizens at the very first place. Second analysis on how we tell you that Communist Party is a major influential power in China itself. Recognize that when you live in communist society or you live in communist country, the leaders itself are not being voted by citizens itself. They are more likely to be chosen by the most influential people on the country, in the country itself, or the president before in China, the president before Xi Jinping. Therefore, those kinds of scenarios don't allow those kinds of democratic value to be implemented in China itself. Third analysis, why democratic value or any types of political value does not suitable for China. Number one, recognize that people in China are for so long, for centuries, have lived within those kinds of policies. The moment that you need to change is the moment that people are going to suffer setbacks within the country itself. We tell you that in countries go where China is not one of the most hegemonical power in the world, the moment that those kinds of society suffer setbacks, the moment that the economical influence that China possess now would be decreased at the end of the day itself, because side government are trying to implement democratic values in those countries itself. But before, yes sir.
Why are you staying in the same stance as Scool when you practically took them down?
No, number one is the same as though, but here what's the second, that's why my second argument, how those kinds of presidents or leaders to implement long-term solutions. Recognize that oftentimes economic plans or economical plans to develop a country does not stay in 8 years or 10 years term. More often not, economic plans like this are 30 years plan or 50 years plan. Therefore, when you allow those kinds of presidents to stay in term for a long time, we allow one plan to be executed very well. How so? Because we tell you, the moment that you shift president, is the moment that the plans or the manifesto of the country will change. We tell you that the moments that many manifestos are being implemented in those countries and not executed very well, is the moment that those kinds of society will not be very stagnant but decreasing itself. We tell you that's what will happen under side government. We think it's very harmful. Last POI.
we think that it's not decreasing in development, but much more focusing on more things that are much more important. You on your side will still leave people walking on mountains to school. Please explain.
Yeah, we will not. We tell you that when China is in power, they have lots of pressure to retain their citizens also. Because some point, because we tell you that one of the most economical sources that China has is their workforce. We tell you that the moment that China does not take care of their citizens very well, as what the government have claimed, their economical power does not exist at the very first year. So we tell you that their claim of what China living in poverty is very low. But we tell you, even let's took the bullet and claim that China is very poverty country, like third world country situation. We tell you it's better. How so? Because we tell you that in a communist society, you need to the dividend because the principle of communist society is very clear. The dividend of treasure or property within the country is the same. Meaning to you that cooperatively under democratic society, where people need to create new economical power, we can that's very much more easier, and also where they don't need to do startups or so on. But under our side, where the government would provide all those types of necessary things that they need to improve their economical power at the very first place. China is a very powerful country in the world. It's a very hegemonic power. It does not suitable to be a democratic country or any types of political system to represent the citizen. We tell you under side closing opposition, we tell you that we make Xi Jinping represent their citizens, and we allow those kinds of presidents to execute their long-term economic development plans. Now we
Alright, enough from inside government, like about government. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, in their world, they envision a China under their characterization, which is a complete communist utopia. Now, let me break a utopia right now by saying, by my analysis and my BCS, WCS comparative within all that. Now, their entire stance of entire side opposition can be summed up into one very short characterization. China is communist. We cannot change that. Now, here's why I don't believe in that. Number one, China is quintessentially no longer what Karl Marx believes to be communist in the first place. China has no longer adheres to a lot of the communist rules that actually existed back then, that actually was decided right now. For example, the idea about how China actually, this is what communism really is. Communism is a political or social ideology which believes that wealth should be divided equally among all levels, that believes that the equality between rulers and its people, that believes that the benefit of people should be placed above the rulers, and believe that there shouldn't be any sort of form of hierarchy in this first place. China has, in an economical sense, they believe in a closed-off market that is self-dependent. Now, here's why China has not fulfilled any of those characteristics of communism. Number one, China has deviated from the idea of protected markets and also a state-controlled market already. Right now they have, after the entire thing with the President Deng Xiaoping and how he has actually opened up China's market and introduced globalization of markets and allowed individual companies to pop up within China. Then these kinds of companies are no longer state-controlled anymore. And besides, on a more social sense, the rich-poor divide is actually now so large that while cities in Beijing prosper, there are people out there in rural areas which cannot afford heaters in winter and cannot afford very basic facilities right now. You see that on that premise alone, it is proven that China no longer cares about the distribution of wealth, which is essentially a communist trait. And last but not least, the idea about how China actually takes care of the people, and like communism is all about taking care of the voices of the people. Communism is all about taking care of the needs of the people. However, it's clear that China no longer prioritizes that within its policies itself. Now, before I move on, yes.
Yeah, so I just want to know one thing, right? Are you going to compromise your communism stance by mixing it with democracy?
No, I'm saying that there is no communism stance anymore within China. The stance of communism does not exist, but on a metaphorical form, wherein they have it in their within they have it within a very flimsy form in their rhetoric. There is no there is only a silver of communism which we believe that will be eradicated in the next few years through globalization and whatnot. Now, let me just say why that the silver of communism will be gone soon. We have already seen that China is slowly stepping away from such old-fashioned communist ideals throughout the past throughout the evolvement of the past few years. Of course, there are things like oppression. There are a few traits within that push down the voices of the people and whatnot. That are technically communist if you come to think about it. But honestly, the only communist part about them is the more political sense, which again can always change. If narratives within on their side they disallow the idea of the exchange of narratives within the Communist Party, or within the Communist Party and the society in itself. Now, on our side, when we celebrate the kind of narratives and changing narratives and whatnot, there is a possibility of democracy being introduced into China. Now, we say that's not possible because the people in China are quintessentially communist. Now, here's why that's wrong. Number one, past events and current events right now, wherein democratic activists are actually gaining underground support, and there's underground web of such democratic activists and the fact that people in China are actually voicing out for people like Liu Xiaobo and whatnot, which are imprisoned incorrectly because of their political beliefs, already proves to the fact that to an extent the Chinese people do believe in the fact to democratic Western ideals, and also their idea about how Chinese people are undereducated about democracy and whatnot. And because of the firewalls and whatnot, now there are things like VPNs, where people can cross the firewalls and enter the Western world and subject themselves to knowledge that is outside China and whatnot. So at the end of the day, people do have a way to access foreign ideologies and understand those things. Now, we see that within all that, we believe that there is a possibility of democratic change in China. If you're willing to accept it under your case, please mitigate that in your speech next. Now, here's how it will happen on our side. Now, within the changing narratives, it is entirely possible that members of the Communist Party do indeed agree to such democratic values, and there can be an existence of change within its current very rigid structures and whatnot. There is a possibility of change. If the Communist Party is as strong as they say and gives as much support as it says, then I will see no more incentivization. Then in the end, the Communist Party will win out and they will just form the government again. But the idea in itself is that if you do not allow these kinds of conversations to go on between China and the Western values, then we believe that at the end of the day there is no kind of interaction, and China will even become more and more isolationist compared to their side and our side. When we have discourse on these kinds of ideas and narratives, on different ideas and narratives, we become a more open China, a China that is more willing to accept other things, and a China that's more willing to accept other people. Now, on their side, that doesn't happen. That one single person can now, if the person has when they focus the power right now, what will happen is that they will be cracked down on all opposing voices, and discourse doesn't eventually happen at all. Now,
For that,
whatever.
yeah, so we think that you're still complying the communist stance that a lot of this communist party is upholding. We think your case is supposed to be whether this two-term is better versus the long-term where you stay for life. Correct your Gulf case.
Now, here's why I believe the current president, now the short term doesn't, how the long term is bad. Number one, the narratives in the Chinese Communist Party are essentially already bad. When you realize that currently there's a large racial divide, and then some people they're destroying slums in Beijing without caring about the ideas of the lower class residents and whatnot. You see all that kind of shit happening in their nation, wherein President Xi Jinping is in place, and you see that people are actually suffering silently because they don't get to voice out their minds. They say that that's because just because they can't speak out, they don't believe in the ideas. But we say that if you can control their voices, but you can't control their minds. We say that at the end of the day, and they are they create a very idealistical utopian society that you shouldn't fall into, because there's ultimately a dark side to it that they are failing to acknowledge, and they are just dismissing it off and being very dismissive about it. And we believe that at our end, we have a better society at the end of the day, wherein there can be discourse, there can be discussions, there can be changing narratives, but on their side they disallow that kind of things. And we can have that kind of speech.
Alright, and now for the last piece of the debate, I'd like to invite the opposition to speak.
It is so selfish for them to only talk by perspective of them as an outsider of China. They never really talk about what will happen to them as a perspective of a China, of a person who lives in China itself. Right? Considering that China, that the people in China, that they have been infused with the ideology of communism for a very long time, right? In which that these people are already okay, they are already naturalized with this idea of communism, right? So we tell you that in our side it is okay, even though there is less discourse, even though that these people doesn't even have, even though that these people have to follow what the government want. We tell you that that is okay. We don't want to have any further kind of discussion and so on, because we don't want it to have different clashes or ideologies in those kind of countries, because we think that it is better for them to stay that way, because now that we see that China is already the number one country, that is China is already developed in the very end. We think that is already okay and that is already enough for these people in China itself. So let's see what happens in the government side. Let's see what happens in the opposition side. Right? So they stated to you on how that they wanted these people to be developed, that they wanted these people to have voice, to voice out their opinions and so on, right? But we tell you that we don't want that kind of thing, that we are okay for these people to stay in that way, to follow what the government wants. Right? Even though they stated to you on how that this president will actually will misuse their powers or so on, but we think that they will still have check and balance for this president. But like we already told you on how that this president of China, which they already have this big power, which they notice that they have to ensure that their society is living well, because the main thing that makes their country to glorify is because of the citizens itself. Right? So what happens in their side if they wanted to shift power to other kinds of party or to liberal party and so on, right? So what happens is that from the very get-go that this society already been infused with the communism idea, in which when you already change this president itself, what happens that it is more like that this society of China is more likely for them to be less related with the government, right? So what happens is that we told you on how that these people will not even feel like that these people, that it is more likely for them to overthrow the current government, right? Because now they don't understand on why they should follow this kind of policies, in which it actually clashes with their own ideology about communism. We tell you that it is that now that the people are still okay, that they live in the country, even though they are living in an echo chamber, we tell that it is still okay, in which they still survive the society, in which they still get jobs, in which they still get the support from the government. We tell you that it is okay. Rather than you live in a situation in their side, which the government and the society itself, they doesn't even have any kind of connections which connects the government and the society. Right? What will more likely to happen in their side is that now that the society, that more riots will more likely to be happen, that these people doesn't agree what the government wanted, that these people doesn't agree what kind of ideology that this government had, because they are most likely to not be related, right? They cannot relate to the idea what the government did. So we tell that it is not okay, that we don't want that situation, even though discourse happen, even though that these people will have discourse on what they wanted to, but we tell that it will only make the constitution to be messier and so on. We don't want that to happen. One thing to be more easy, which that these people still have to follow but still have the benefits that they get. We think that that is okay in the current school. But before that, yes.
Don't you think that the people will realize that their welfare is catered to and start listening to the new government when policies are changed?
You tell me that now, in the current school now, that China itself, that they are already developed enough, right? That they can cater to society in the first place. But even though that they realize that their welfare are not being catered and so on, but we tell you that we still do not want it to have these special limits, because the moment when they realize that they don't have enough things, or if that bad case scenario, we say that it is more likely for the society to have backlash towards the government, right? It is more likely for these people to not live in a situation where they cannot live harmoniously and so on, right? We said that we don't want that kind of situation. We are better in which they stay in the situation like now, in which that now that the government still they have the check and balance to ensure that the society lives in a better life, because that's what being a president means, right? Which you being elected in China, that this Xi Jinping is being elected because they get support from the people. Which means if they get support from the people, which means people are okay with what they are going through. And we tell that that is not a problem. That we think that it is okay in the very end of the day. And second of all, on how they stated to, on how they wanted to improve policies and so on. The thing they want to improve policies is to improve policies with they wanted to improve policies by having a different president, right, in which the president is more like not communist and so on. But we said that this will only give more harm to society, which they already that this society they are more likely to do backlash and so on. We don't want that to happen. We want them to stay in the same state as they had been for a very long time, such as when we see in North Korea and stuff, in which Kim Jong-un that he does use his propaganda to see him as a perfect president. So what happens that now that people follow him, that people see him as a perfect president, and we think that that is still okay in order for this country to prosper better, in order for this country to have in order for this country, the government and the people to have more to be related more, right, to have more understanding between each other. We think that that is already okay, rather than in your side, it means you will only have a lot of discussion, you will only have a lot of arguments between people and the government. We think that it's not okay. We are sticking to Francisco. With that, thank you.
Alright, congratulations on winning the star again. Thank you for the great winning.